So I had recently been rewatching AVGN because I do like some massacre stuff, and I'd watched the Simon's Quest review, and I don't know, it does feel like, how to put it, so something exists initially, right? And then it's sort of brought into the spotlight of popular culture by some other means. It could be in many years later, like with AVGN, or it could be just at the time of its release. However, because of this, a person's outlook on something is completely warped by that presentation, in particular because they weren't around when the game first came out, game in this situation, or played it themselves. I think better examples of this would be, well, some people defend CastleVania 64 and the issue with the Nitro. I guess the best way to put it is that one really should try a game themselves before forming an opinion. I think everyone knows this, but since I had recently been playing Simon's Quest myself, like even more recently than the video of it on my channel, I thought, you know what, I'll actually review this game. It's not some angry review or anything like that, but like a legit review. So before I record this, I played through the game, sub 2 hours, 100% items, and under 7 days. I did not get all 13 secret books because those aren't required. Plus I don't know where all of them are, and they're poorly translated, so there is no point. I did get the ones that came across my path though. But let's get started. So the format of this interview, or of this review, will be the following. I'll first go over the good things of the game, the questionable things of the game, the bad things of the game, the bad but understandable things of the game, the false complaints, the tricky things, and some extra stuff at the end. I have not done this yet, but I will do some editing of my game footage into this to sort of emphasize my points at times. And it's partially a reminder for myself. Anyways, the good things. Having played most of the Castlevania games and beaten most of them, I've gotten very invested in the plot myself. Like for example, dude, I seriously wish 99 would have had a game with Julius. That'd be pretty cool. But in any case, I do think the plot in this is reasonable, especially since it is based off of a Hammer horror film, wherein Simon, after having defeated Dracula, was mortally wounded, and it was consequently cursed to die. Only by slaying Dracula again can he kill the curse. I think it's interesting, but I wish it wouldn't be like reviving Dracula per se, but it'd be a wraith or something like that. Because if it's like a true revival, then it just seems so easy, as opposed to how later down the line they turn it into every 100 years darkness, or the powers of good weaken and darkness rises, but this is early on in the series, so it makes sense. In summary though, it is a pretty interesting plot, and even as a foundation for a game, I think it's really good, and I'll actually get into that at a later point in this. As for music, I think no one can question that this game has some of the best music ever. Like otherwise, how could you really even play this during certain parts where there is some monotony? Like Dwelling of Doom is amazing, even though it's just in certain sections of the game. I believe it's only in the mansions, and I believe Dracula's castle. I don't have all the names of the music matched up in my head. I know there's like, darn it, I've downloaded the OSTs for all 3 of the games. So, for example, Monster Dance is in my head, but I think that's from CastleVania III, not 2. But in any case, the music is sublime. As for the graphics, I think they're reasonably good, given the architecture. It's not Mario 3, it still has a blocky look to it, but I think it fits. This is, like, Mario is very cartoony, so if you define stuff like eyes and such, nothing's really lost. But if you did that with Castlevania, which especially back then had a more realistic feel, just look at the cover art for the first game, the second game, third game, and yes, the fourth game too. Like, you can't, it wouldn't really look good, so I think the graphics are decent enough, and if we're talking in terms of color palette, I think it also works. It doesn't have some vibrance that stuff like, I believe it's level 2, the mummy level, in the original Castlevania would have, where it has those nice light blues, despite it meaning to be a dark game, or the light yellows in the on the towers before Dracula in the first game. But I think it fits the ambiance of, let's say, roaming outside in Transylvania. I guess one could at minimum say that the mansions inside might be a bit too grim. Like, maybe the color palette there could have been a bit better, but overall I think it's good. So those are the good things. Moving on to the questionable things. So the mansion layouts. It's a bit of a tough call. Like, I don't consider them bad. In particular, I say that because if you look into Castlevania, there's stuff like the MSX version where it's literally like a puzzle game. And so there being multiple rooms inside of this mansion, and perhaps some secret stuff hidden, is not something I find out of place necessarily. So in terms of the mansion layout as a whole, I don't find an issue. Naturally, the variety of enemies in the mansions could be a bit better. Because let's see, even in the first game, I feel like at least one new enemy was introduced per level. Let's see, so in the first one you have those special ghouls that only are in the first level, I'm pretty sure. In the second level you introduce the hunchbacks. In the third, which would be Frankenstein's, I hope I'm counting this right. Let's see, first you fight the bat, then you fight the mummy. Then you fall off a cliff and fight Frankenstein. In there you have the skeleton snake dragon heads from the wall. Then you fight Death. There you have those, oh, I missed Medusa. Yeah, I missed Medusa. Well, that adds the Medusa heads. You know that already. But then we get to Death stage where you get those suits of armors that can just wreck you on the hall before death. Then you have Dracula's thing where, I don't think they introduce anything new there, but they do have the giant bats, which at this point are reduced to just a normal enemy, which itself is pretty interesting. And then you have Dracula, of course. So, by comparison, I do believe that more could be done with the mansions. Like, I think there's only a selection of 3 real enemies: skeletons, soldiers, like normal soldiers, like the ones you see in level 2 of CastleVania 1. And devils at times. Well, I guess there's spiders in one level, but like the variety is minimal. So beyond the mansion's layout, which I consider at least pretty good, decent enough. So after you get the orb, there is no skip to the start. And I have looked at all the walls in this thing, and I don't know, to me, when I look at the design, I could be completely wrong, but it just looks and feels as if they were planning for there to be more or some skip to the start. It just feels as if there are locations in the wall where, say, you could use holy water and then, I don't know, it'll lead you out. To me, that's just something I wish was in the game. I guess it sort of makes sense. Even in the first game, there is no actual skip to start. Like, you beat a level, and that next level, technically, at least as shown by the map screen, is a direct transition to the next, so I guess it could be out of place. Nevertheless, given the puzzle-like nature of mansions, I truly think that a skip to the start would have been nice. Another questionable thing is the graphical glitches that occur at times. A very obvious one is the orb. So let's say you hit the orb, you get the item, then you walk away a bit, then reload the screen. The orb is back. Similarly, bosses respawn. There are only two, which would be Death and Carmilla. This happens for every sprite, and I get why it exists for most of the sprites because of the farming nature of this game. It's your classical RPG in a sense, where you have to farm experience in hearts, currency. Nevertheless, you would think you could restrict that to certain elements. Another questionable thing would be that the townspeople lie to you, but to me that's just realistic. Is everyone gonna town, especially in sort of like a horror-esque game like Castlevania, tell you the truth? Some might say that's where gameplay versus story should be balanced differently. I know some people would prefer gameplay to outmatch story at times, or things done due to story. But in this situation, I think it's fine. This is an adventure game, in part. I'll get into this later, but I worry that people these days, especially adults who grew up playing video games and now lack time, have too much of a completionist mindset regarding games. Like, as an adult, who's to say you can really sit down and enjoy the adventure of the game, right? Another questionable thing would be that certain mansions require you to walk through walls. Personally, I don't find this an issue because, again, puzzle game type stuff on the MSX, but also the way I approach games is I don't only play it as a game, I do try and think of the meta. It's not even really meta in any crazy way, just basic stuff. Like, for example, you enter in from the left hand side of the screen to the mansion. Well, naturally, there's no point in going to the upper left unless it's for an item or something, because you can't transition to the left because that would lead you out of the mansion. Obviously the next section of the mansion will have to be to the right, so it really reduces the places you have to look, and also generally you end up going up, so between any two paths I always tend to go up. So stuff like that. So although I think the walking through walls stuff can be a bit tricky, in particular because I don't think anything reveals it. I don't believe the eye reveals that. The eye only reveals clues. Eyeball Dracula, that is. I think it is fair enough. And lastly, another questionable thing would be the lack of bosses. Plot-wise, that's fine, like Death, he always exists, and Carmilla, a nice addition. And if you read the hints for it, they actually relate Death and Carmilla. But, I do believe, like I rate this as questionable because I do believe you could have had more bosses, especially even derived from the lore. I'll get into that later if, later in this, or at the end if I don't find a good place to put it. Now let's get on to the real bad things. This really I feel as if most bad things of this game stem from translation, which we all know is atrocious. Like, let's be real here, what do people complain about all the time? The whirlwind. Well, there is a safeguard for that, and like, I'll get into that after this, but like, core issue with this game is translation, and I'll just leave it at that for that. Another bad thing is the lack of bosses. I put this under questionable things and bad things because like it's leaning towards bad, and that's due to the fact that I can come up with an idea in game why you should have had more bosses. Again, perhaps a time crunch, but it just seems so odd for one of their big IPs. Like, they made second games for all the good IPs that were successful. Zelda got a Zelda 2, Castlevania got a Castlevania 2, Mario got a Mario 2 and 3. At this, like, you think for these almost defining IPs, more effort would have been put in. It's just a surprise. Another terrible thing, in my opinion, is the position of the lakes. So in this game there are two lakes that you'll kneel by with a crystal. In particular the first one, because obviously that would be the first time you encounter it. You're meant to kneel down and whatever, the lake disappears. There's a hint for this in game, whatever. That's not my complaint. My complaint is actually how near it is to the transition of the screen. Because although I have the map sort of memorized by this point, especially for someone playing their first time, but even myself, you are fucking walking from the left hand side to the right hand side and you're just real casual about it. You're not thinking because you're just like, yep, I need to go this way. And then you walk into the fucking lake and die. And depending on the circumstances, that really will mess you up, because two things are lost when you game over: your hearts and your experience points. I'll get into that after this, but that loss of time is insane if you lose those things, and depending on the location you're in the game, devastating. And actually, based off of the times at which you would approach these lakes, it's almost always devastating. Well, at least for the first one. The first one with certainty. The second one might not be so. By the time you get to the second one, I believe you would have the morning start with, so you'd be done with hearts. But experience points would still be a thing, so it could still be very terrible. And that leads us to our next bad thing, experience points. Like, oh my god. You'll see it in the gameplay. Not really, because I think I'll just use clip and speed up, but So in this game, I kid you not, you have to level up. Like if you don't, you are screwed. Like the whips are actually more important, I'd say, because attack powers everything, but there comes a point in this game where health does matter. In particular, every 2 levels. So you'll get to 2, that's a nice increment. You'll get to 4, that's a very nice increment. And I'd say at that point you can stop. But well, even just to 4, let's say this, experience points are a pain in the ass to get, because they don't, they are determined by hearts. It's not how many enemies you kill or something nice like that, it is hearts. So it gets really crazy, especially by level 5 and 6, where let's say you have max hearts, which is 256, due to how they store it, probably in just some integer. You have 256, and you'll still have a lot of EXP you have to get, you know? Because EXP goes in like 50 increments, so I think the first level up is 100, then 150, then 200, then 250, then 300, then I forget if it's 350, I think it's 350 next, but and it resets you to 0 each time, so it becomes obvious that that'll be a problem, especially when only hearts give you these experience points, and furthermore, it's worse than that. There's only certain enemy classes will give you experience points once you reach a level, because you have to be fighting enemies of the appropriate level to gain experience. And this is determined by the location of the map. I'm pretty sure that's at least how it seems to me. Now, let's take this a step further. So, I did 100% running my thing, and I tell you, level 5 and 6, insanity. You have to grind for 300, and then you either have to grind for 300 again or 350, I forget, but it is horrific. Like, the first 4 levels you can get through just a bit of grinding per mansion you go to, and you're just like, okay, whatever, I have to do that anyways, because I'll also get hearts and I'll buy my next whip, or laurels or garlic or whatever. It's very fine. But level 5 and 6 are a nightmare. So there are 5 mansions, so the 5th level would be the one you'd get in the 5th mansion, like you'd grind to get that. Even that is insanity. Like, I beat that mansion and I had only like 80 experience, I think, and still had to grind out the remainder. And okay, I do that. Then there's level 6. At this point I'd be like, why is there not another mansion or something? To have to double grind in a single mansion, it's just ludicrous. Or at least give me another whip, or have a whip in between, or just don't have those levels. And when I say whip in between, I mean so that my hearts have some sort of value. In the end, the approach to experience in this should have been the following. All enemies give experience, maybe curve it so that it's actually like a standard RPG, like lower level enemies give you 1 experience, high level enemies give you 50 experience, and then have some, I don't know, quadratic or some exponential curve for leveling up, so that you're always reaching a sort of peak per mansion of leveling up, provided you don't die, but even then not make it so terrible if you do. Like, I tell you, the experience points are the real bad thing I, as someone who knows his way around the game, has encountered. Next, let's move on to the bad but understandable things. Everyone talks about that whirlwind, okay? The one where you kneel down with a red crystal, smash your head on Deborah Rock or whatever. But as I said in the bad thing, the true bad thing in this game is the translation. The whirlwind is actually one of the few things that is explicitly put into your path to learn. This comes from the following. So there are 13 hints in this game, and I believe that's either in the instruction manual or it's even given as a clue in game, but there's 13 notes, and these are guaranteed to tell you the truth. Townspeople are up in the air, but these hints are always true. And there's a mansion. In this mansion you get the eyeball of Dracula. What does this eyeball do? It reveals secrets in walls. What's the first thing you'd theoretically do as someone playing this game? Once you get the eyeball, well, you put it on. Then you have to backtrack out of the mansion. Well, what would you find? You would find this note. Even if you didn't do that, it is in such an obvious position. Like, the blocks are shaped weirdly and it's in a weird place. Like, it just appears off, but regardless, you would probably have the eyeball equipped if you have any sense at all. And you would find this note, and it's the one which, when poorly translated, says something like wait for a soul or something. But if it was translated properly, it'd tell you to wait for a wind at the cliff. And by the time you get there, you'd probably have a red crystal. Like, you'd have to pass through that town to do it anyways, and the guy who looks like you trades you the crystal is obvious. It's right there in the middle, and you'd walk by and see him. Unless you went by at night, I guess that's the one thing, but so you'd do that. You'd have a red crystal, you would have known about the wind. The only thing up in the air at that point is to kneel. That's it. Do I think the delay might be a bit much on waiting for the wind? Perhaps, but what are the only things you can do? You have the red crystal, it says wait for a wind. Stand there, kneel down. I guarantee you would do those two things, and bam, you get your answer. So I truly think the whirlwind is not an actual issue. Translation was the whole core of that, because the game literally constructs itself in a manner so that it would not be an issue. I believe I already covered this, but that the townspeople lie. To me, that's meant to be an adventure. And here's where I'll get into the thing where, so people around my age in particular, perhaps, who played video games as kids, and those older than me, you don't really have time to play them because you have a job or something like that, and so what do you want to do? Well, you want to play a game, right? So I experienced this personally where I will play stuff like Burger Time or Galaga or Tetris because those are quick yet fun games that suits my type of schedule these days more. But let's say you're in the mood to actually play an adventure game. Let's say you want to play Zelda or you want to play CastleVania. Well, you can't really take your time doing that because it really would be an investment of time. I would argue it wouldn't be as much time as when you were a kid because supposedly you have an adult brain these days, and it's not actually that difficult to do. But it still would be a lot more time because it would have that adventuring aspect to it. But I feel like that would diminish the fun you'd have with the game, because at that point, what are you doing? You're just playing a game to get a checkbox, playing a game to get an achievement. It's a pointless achievement at that's being a fucking game. If you're not enjoying the act of discovery and the act of playing it, I feel like you've lost the true joy a game is meant to provide at its core. And when I say game, I do mean any game. I'm not being particular to video games. It's like if someone played a sport only to win. Like, winning is fun, but if you don't enjoy the game itself, it's gonna feel pretty terrible. So yeah, those are that but understandable. As for the false complaints, these false complaints again stem from the AVGN episode. I know that it's just a character James plays, he likes the game too, but I thought they should be addressed because again, people would have preconceived notions about a game because their first introduction to the game is via something in the popular culture, and eventually it is just known to be terrible, even though it isn't really. So holy water usage. There is a big perception that holy water needs to be used in this game a lot, and I'll tell you, it doesn't. I'm pretty sure you could on maybe one hand, maybe two hands, count how many times I used holy water. For blocks, or out of fear of blocks. Actually, let's not even phrase it that way. Fall through platforms. I think I used it once, if not twice, throughout the whole playthrough. And let's just give a highbrow estimate of 5 times. But it's definitely not a game where you're like throwing the holy water around all the time in order to avoid falling in a pit. I feel like most of that stems from fear. So let's say you're walking through a mansion, you fall through a hole, you get set back a bit. At that point, you yourself allow yourself to be fearful of a loss of progress. As a result, you just start throwing holy water arbitrarily in order to avoid this issue. Little did you realize you waste more time throwing holy water than if you just had played the game and fallen into the holes, because let me be real. So in the first mansion, there's fall through blocks on an edge. It's the first encounter you have with them. Okay, so there's one. Later on, there is one, but there's a skeleton walking near it, so he would reveal that there is a hole there because he would turn back. One thing you'll also note that holes generally appear, well, in mansions at least, in certain sections. It's most often in front of, I don't know what you'd call it, like a window. It's not really a window, but it's the artifact in the background where they can occur. And generally you'll see a skeleton there who's walking back and forth, who will then reveal to you that there is a hole or is not a hole. There's one random one where it's near one of the blobs in, I think, the 4th mansion or 3rd mansion. Yeah, outside of the mansions I know there's some when you try to go to, I think it's get the silk bag, maybe it's a diamond, I think it's a silk bag, but in short, it occurs not often at all that you need holy water, at least for the notion of avoiding fall through blocks. Even using holy water to break blocks is very rare. So don't be gripped by fear, like I swear. Fall through stuff a few times, whatever. Look at how the skeletons move. It's not that bad at all. Again, perhaps it's the fear of the loss of progress, but again, it's an adventure. It's not meant to be completed in 2 hours until you know the game. Another tricky thing is, okay, so when you play this game, I personally believe the first half is very easy. you get your white crystal, you head right, you beat the first 2 mansions, whatever. Then becomes a part of potential time loss. Well, you come back, then there's the ferryman on the, like, you're ready to head to the left side of the game. There's a ferryman. Do you know to show him the hearts? If you don't, you go somewhere else. So when I'll actually first start with this. So I've beaten this game before, whatever. I also have beaten it in a non-standard way. So one of the times more recently that I played it, I actually forgot what the order was for showing stuff to the ferryman. So I did the first 2 mansions on the right, then I just went to the ferryman and I was like, okay, take me to a nice place. Okay, so then I go there, I do all the stuff, I do the whirlwind, I do everything, and then by the time I exit Carmilla's mansion, I'm like, dang, oh no, I don't have all of the pieces of Dracula. And so at that point, what am I forced to do? I'm forced to track through a frickin' poison swamp and then go across to Carmilla Cemetery, which is all the way on the other side of the map, and then walk all the way back over to get to that mansion, show the ferryman the heart, get to that mansion, then head back to the ferryman, have him take me back to the other place, do the whirlwind again. Like, even doing that, guess what? I still beat it in under 7 days. So even in the worst case scenario, it can be in under 7. So obviously you could still beat the game in under 14 if you want, perhaps. But even then, at that point, like, again, the time thing is not that big of an issue in your first playthrough because you're just playing the game. But if you did care about time, this tricky thing in the game is not actually too terrible. But in any case, it is stated in the game the following. So you get the heart. There are also townspeople who say stuff. I forget if it's townspeople or secrets, but it sounds more like townspeople BS. But the heart breaks the curse, and then that the eye breaks the curse, or something like that, or shows, whatever. Well, what does this tell you? Well, you already have the heart, so the heart breaks the curse. Obviously the heart must have some relevance, right? And then it mentions the eye. So you would at least feel like that's the next item I should get. I forget if the instruction guide would say anything to the order of the body parts, but whatever. This is at least in your mind. Furthermore, considering you just got the heart, you would hopefully have it equipped. There is a tricky thing here because on the left hand side of the screen, right before the ferryman, there are guys who shoot out fireballs, which would prompt you to have the rib equipped because it acts as a shield. But it is at least reasonable that since the heart is the latest thing you have, that you would have it equipped. So it's a bit of a toss-up, but I feel like there are sufficient hints for it, and even if you fail to do so, you can still get under 7 while doing it. Another tricky thing is that beyond the Wicked Ditch, which is on the path to... So after you take the whirlwind, the right side of the screen is what leads to Dracula's castle and a few towns. If you go that way and you keep going straight, you don't head to Dracula's castle, you reach a poison pond. But if you cross that poison pond, you're basically screwed. you'd think. But there's an invisible staircase to lead you back. I think that's a bit BS, but I don't know. Odd choice, I'll say. Like, what would you want them to do instead? Reset at that point? I think it's funny, but I'll actually quick aside there and say that in Carmilla's mansion, you can actually get laurels. Like, this guy will fill you up. Especially if it was silk bag, you get 8. So in theory it wouldn't be an issue by that point in the game because Carmilla's mansion is right before Dracula. And I'll also just add as a note here for anyone that laurels aren't just poison invincibility, they're true invincibility. Like on that rush to Dracula's mansion, if you get those 8 laurels in the mansion, you can just blow through everything, not even have to fight, just run. Yeah. Darn it, I had a thought on with respect to that. Laurels. I'll say it if it comes back to me. Beyond that, I already mentioned you should make sure to level up, especially 2 and 4. Oh, and also, when you grind hearts and experience, you'll want to do that in a mansion because time freezes in a mansion. And I think the last thing I'll say is that patience is a thing. Again, back to the completion thing. Who cares if you don't beat it within 14 days? First time I played, I got the worst ending. Like, actually, first time I played, I didn't beat it. Even with Nintendo Power. I was only, what, 9, 8, 7, whatever. But first time I did beat it, plus 14 days, terrible fate. However, I put the knowledge I had to use from beating it the first time. I was like, okay, how can I do this? Got the next ending. Beautiful. Then you optimize it a bit more, and boom, you got under 7. So yeah, just have patience with the game because it is an adventure game. And just to make the first, actually I think it'll be revealed in the gameplay, but like the first half is just so easy. You go right. You reach a mansion. Boom, you got to a mansion. Well, why not then go back and try the other path? That would be normal, right? You hit the mansion, you can go forward, but you know, maybe forward would be more difficult stuff, so you go back and test the other path. Oh, wouldn't you know, that leads you to a town. What's in that town? A dagger, a chain whip, definitely buy that, and let's say you then go right. Now this is where it gets a bit iffy, but if you had checked from the mansion's right hand side enough during one of your first playthroughs, you'd be like, oh wow, actually both of these paths converge onto, I forget what it's called, Diabs, whatever. The dark path with the eyes and the bats. They just converge there. And so at that point you're like, okay, they lead to the same place. I just got my chain whip and my dagger. Let's head up through here and go right. And okay, so now at the next section, another fork in the road. Well, if you head down, you'd reach the lake, and well, you can't go through there. So you would have gone straight. You would have reached the town. You'd exchange your blue crystal, or exchange for the blue crystal. If you went a bit farther, it would be a dead end at the cemetery. If you knew the hint about the garlic, you could get the silver knife. You go back. You head back to the lake. You kneel down. It consumes the water. again, that hint might be tricky because of poor translation, but I feel like, again, because it's just giant lake, obviously something should be there, so you would at least try something. You just got a blue crystal, so blue crystal would likely be equipped. What can you do there? You can stand or kneel, so there you go. Actually, back to the whirlwind again. Since you would have learned that kneeling does most things in this game, boom, kneeling. From this, whirlwind, waiting from the secret, and the red crystal you would have already had for the whirlwind. Boom, the game sets it up exactly so that you can do it. But yeah, so then you go, you have the lake disappear, you go into that mansion, you beat that, then you just backtrack your way to the left because you have technically checked all the way to the dead end on this path. Then you reach the ferryman. Again, here it gets tricky. If you don't give him the heart, it gets pretty confusing, but confusing because you'd have to backtrack. But if you did hold on to the heart, because that is the most recent item you had, he'd show you the way. I believe you immediately reach a mansion. You'd beat that. You'd explore a bit to the left. Surprise, surprise. There is an item you get over there, but after you investigate enough, it really is just a dead end. Like, it's a pretty short location, I'm pretty sure. I don't actually think there's much over there. There's the diamond, I believe, and I'm pretty sure that's it. Yeah, oh my, yeah, that's just it. There's the diamond. You'd head over there, jump some blocks rather, and then there's diamond back. Then you'd head back, because there's nothing else to do. Well, there's nothing to the right, because again, you had already exhausted that. So, at that point, you would equip your new item, which would be the eyeball. And what else can you do? Talk to the ferryman? Like, maybe you'd investigate a bit more for, because you'd be stumped, but eventually you'd talk to the ferryman again with the eye equipped. He would then take you to a good place, and you would reach the remainder of the game. At this point, you would head to the left. You would exchange for a red. Let me try and get my order right here. You'd exchange for a red crystal. Naturally, you'd keep going left. If you took the bottom path further on, if you took the bottom path further on, you would then get the silk bag, which is a dead end. You'd head back, whatever. You would then take the upper path. Oh, by the way, pardon if I get the items wrong. I don't have the map memorized completely, or the items at least. I just know there's stuff there. Then you take the other path. That leads you to the next. Actually, I forget if the downwards path actually leads to a graveyard where you drop garlic, but in any case, whatever. Take the upper path, that leads you to a new town, you get your morning star. Sorry. You get your morning star, you keep going left again. Pretty sure that leads you to the whirlwind. So you do that, you'd have everything equipped for that too. Teleports you away. Here's the one questionable part. If you could take him by the whirlwind, you could go right or left. Right will lead you to Dracula's castle, and that could be a big time waste. Because you'd go that way and it's like, oof. So that part, I guess I could say, make sure to head left. Because if you do go left, you would reach a mansion. Um, and it still is a bit tricky because beyond the mansion you can continue going left, which would then loop you around back to the whole right side of the game. So definitely don't do that, but there's a lot of poison that way, so hopefully you wouldn't. It's a bit tricky because the guy in the mansion gives you laurels, so it might deceive you into thinking you should, but in any case, I only claim that the first half of the game, and particularly the right side early game, was easy. It gets a bit tricky later on, progressively so. So at this tricky point, you would have to make sure you go left, do the Carmilla Mansion, then go right. I guess the only way, like what would hint you to that would be is, no matter what, it's a guess to go to the left first for the mansion, I'll give that, but after you beat that mansion you would have all of the items. Considering there was stuff to the right of where the whirlwind brought you, perhaps it could be reasonable to suppose that something must be over there of value and you already have all the items, so it must be Dracula's castle, if you get what I mean. And so you'd head that way afterwards. And then you could keep going, and then you could either get screwed over with the poison pond where you need to take the invisible staircase, or you reach Dracula's castle. That's a toss-up again. But in any case, you have first section on the right when you start the game, very easy. Left section of the game with the ferryman, a bit harder, as long as you get the heart order right. Pretty easy too, because there's dead ends. Post whirlwind, pretty tough at that point, because you gotta make sure you go to the right place, but you know, after you beat it the first time, in theory you'd know that, so that would no longer be an issue. But for your first playthrough it would be a bit tricky. In any case, I just wanted to say that I think it's a really good game, and most of the things people complain about, like what really spurred this on was the complaints about holy water, and the lack of complaints about experience points that drew me to make this. Like, as a review, this is pretty long, it's freaking 50 some minutes, but yeah, I like to ramble on. See y'all.